welcome. This is the first one of these that we've done this year, which is hard to believe because it's already March, but it's been a very busy start to the year for everybody. And I know that this time especially is extremely busy with the budget process and legislative session in full swing. So there's a lot going on, but we really wanted to get everybody together because we have these very timely opportunities that we're going to be talking about today. One is this fantastic NYSERDA RFP for municipalities to get money to go zero emission in their building codes, which is very exciting and a wonderful carrot. So Liz is going to be here from NYSERDA to talk about that. We are also going to hear from Luis. Many of us know Luis in Ithaca, who is doing incredible pioneering work to help decarbonize all of Ithaca's buildings by 2030, which is amazing. And then, of course, another very timely presentation from Jen Metzger, who is going to be talking about the Climate Action Council hearings that are kicking off next week and making sure that everyone has the information they need on the building sector and encourage everyone to participate. So, and of course, also timely is the climate emergency that is ever present that we all want to be taking action on to get off fossil fuels as quickly as possible. So great to be here with you all. Thank you so much for being here and participating. And it's great to see you. And I will pass it off to my friend and colleague, author and longtime advocate. And now we're so fortunate to have as a Clean Power Fellow, Ibrahim Abdul-Mateen.
Hello, Betta, thank you so much. Everyone here who does know Betta know that she is a force of nature. She is she makes things happen. So just for a moment, can we just give snaps to Betta?
Stop it, Ibrahim.
Yeah, we got to do it. We got to do it. We got to give snaps.
You're killing me here.
She literally makes so much happen, and she's such
we all make it happen together.
Indeed.
And by the way, I love your shirt. I lived in Fort Greene, as you know, for many years, so that is a very cool shirt.
Trying to rep.
Represent.
Trying to rep. I have the distinct honor of bringing on our colleague Elizabeth Staubach. Is that how you say your name correctly? From NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And the reason why I call it a distinct honor is because, Elizabeth, you have to bear with me for a moment that for a long time, NYSERDA, it seemed like just didn't care about downstate. I'm just going to cry a little bit for a moment. And so as a New York City person, we were always like, NYSERDA, NYSERDA. But as of late, and not that this is a New York City focused thing, but as of late, NYSERDA has become this astonishing entity that has reached out all of its arms and embraced all different new technologies and new ideas in a way that, some of us never thought possible. And the fact that you're on this call to share what you're going to share brings me so much energy. And it's such a really, just awesome. So you get to bring that to this space. So the new face of NYSERDA, the face of NYSERDA that's going to help decarbonize New York State, and it's going to help us transition to a clean energy economy, to be the best state that we could possibly be, and how we're going to do that in the minutia of building codes and the built environment. That is the cue for you, Elizabeth, to share all the beautiful things you're going to share with us.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I don't think I'm going to live up to that hype, but I will do my best. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really great to be able to have working and right on cue, just so everyone knows the 5-year-old has entered the room. So my apologies, did not time that movie appropriately. But thank you very much for letting me join today's meeting and share the information on this very exciting RFP we have out. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see that, just to confirm? Okay. So here we're going to talk about the Stretch to Zero pilot program. It's RFP 4859. The proposals for this RFP are due on April 21st. I love you too, buddy. Go in the other room. I'll be done in a minute. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. So I love you, but now go away. So again, my
You're welcome.
apologies. But
All us
April
moms
21st
understand.
at 3 p.m. Trying to get there we go. So just an overview, as you've spoken about, NYSERDA is doing a lot of great work with energy codes and advancing energy codes, starting with the development of the Stretch 2020, the first iteration of our Stretch Energy Code. I'm currently working on the development of Stretch 2023, which will move the state even closer to our greenhouse gas reduction goals. But we have to understand that we have to go farther. And so what we are doing here with the Stretch to Zero pilot program is working with municipalities to adopt a zero on-site greenhouse gas emission code. We think that this will require all new construction within the municipality to be all electric, but that's going to be finalized during the development and adoption process. And as we go through, you'll learn that we're really looking for municipalities to partner with NYSERDA on this effort. We're really looking to work with municipalities so we can understand what will need to happen for municipalities across the state to go to a zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions code, which I have learned is a mouthful. So when I refer to the code or the adoption, please understand that that's what I mean. Okay, so for the Stretch to Zero pilot program, we have two categories. Category 1 aims to award municipalities $500,000 each for the adoption and implementation of a zero on-site greenhouse gas emission code by December 2023. Category 2 looks to make awards to municipalities that have already taken the first steps, have already taken that local legislative action to adopt a zero greenhouse gas emission code, but who want to learn from the others going through the process, who are willing to share information with NYSERDA. These municipalities can receive $25,000 per quarter over the course of the 2-year pilot program for $200,000 award. And really, as I've kind of referenced, the goal is to work with these municipalities to identify the obstacles and the issues that municipalities are going to face when going through this process. And then as we do that, develop the tools and the best practices to prepare for future local statewide implementation. We want to share this information with other municipalities looking to do these things in the future. So as I say, work with municipalities, another partner that municipalities will have in this process is a technical support contractor. So as part of the process, NYSERDA has entered into a contract with a technical support contractor that'll work directly with each of the municipalities. This contractor is going to be working on adopting the final finalizing the final adoption mechanisms for each municipality, working on developing an outreach and implementation plan for each municipality, including stakeholder outreach and engagement with targeted strategies for disadvantaged communities. The technical support contractor will also work on the development of training and education for the public, for stakeholders, and for municipal staff. And they'll also be able to, identify opportunities for enforcement, whether that be the use of third party or hiring additional municipal staff. So for the proposal requirements, the first one off the bat, the technical part of NYSERDA programs is that municipalities that pay into the system benefit charge are eligible for participation in the program. But overall, what NYSERDA is looking for from municipalities are municipalities that are clearly committed to adopting a zero on-site greenhouse gas emission code and can demonstrate a history of taking aggressive actions on the environment, on sustainability issues. In addition, we want to make sure that the municipalities that are participating have historic development and have development projects in the pipeline. We want to ensure that the adoption of the greenhouse gas emission code will have an impact. And finally, we're looking for municipalities that have a history of successfully implementing and managing state and federal grant programs. You know, municipalities that have done this before are used to responding to state agencies, are used to filling out those forms on a quarterly basis to tell us how things are going. But again, the goal of this program is for municipalities to go through this process, for NYSERDA to work on collecting this information so we can help others out in the future. So for the proposal requirements, this is actually what you have to send to me. I have gotten this question previously. There is no template for the application. Really just looking for municipalities to compile this information and submit. So for category 1, the full $500,000, we're looking for a municipal resolution that clearly states that members of the city council, the town board, you know, the elected leaders in your municipality understand what it means to participate in this program, what it means to apply, understanding that if you're awarded, you're committed to the adoption and implementation of the new code. This is not the legislative, solution to the adoption of the code, just a commitment saying that I, supervisor of any town, understand what I'm applying for and what the commitment will be. For category 2, this is for municipalities that have already gone on the record, you know, taken steps to achieve a zero on-site greenhouse gas emission code. What we're looking for from those municipalities is a similar municipal resolution, just committing them to participate in the program, committing them to share information with NYSERDA and with the other participating municipalities. Some of the information they'll be sharing will be different. You know, we're looking to understand how they got to the point where, you know, they took this action and then share their stories and their experiences with adoption and implementation. We would like municipalities to provide information on the previous actions they've taken on environmental and sustainability issues, including if the municipality has adopted a greenhouse gas reduction goals. Please include where you are in that process. You know, what steps you've taken, how far are you away from achieving that ultimate goal? As I mentioned previously, we want to make sure that the municipalities that participate in this program have development going on so that the code will have an impact. So we're looking for a summary of previous years, building permit data broken down by commercial, residential, and then also, you know, what projects you have in the pipeline. And just so you know, I missed that, but that's for category 1 only. That's for the 500,000 one. Category 2, you don't need to give me your development activity. To continue on with the requirements for category 1 only, again, the full $500,000, we're looking for letters of support. We want to understand that, you know, you've already started to engage stakeholders in this process, that those who are going to be participating in the planning and the outreach, that they understand what's going on. So if it's local developers, local chamber of commerce, just, you know, your stakeholders, to make sure that they understand and that they're going to be engaged and active in this process. We're also looking for, you know, an outline of the use of funds for a portion of all of it. So you could provide, you know, an outline of how you intend to use the full 500,000 or just a portion of it. I'm sorry if you can hear that in the background.
The joy.
Yes.
Joy.
Boy and his dog. So I do apologize, Tommy. Shh. So the proposal must include just how the municipality intends to deploy the funds, and also in that description of how they plan to deploy the funds. Please identify if there's any specific programs that would be targeted towards low to moderate income individuals or to disadvantaged communities, as well as if there would be any municipal match or any public-private partnerships that would be developed as part of the program. And finally, we're looking for references. This is where, you know, we would like to get an understanding of who would be managing the grant program at the municipal level and what their experience has been doing this with other programs. That goes to the responsiveness, understanding that there is going to be a commitment from participating municipalities to be sharing information on NYSERDA. So we want to just have an understanding of who the project team would be and their experience doing this in the past. My apologies. So for the evaluation criteria, we're looking, again, like I stated before, that the municipality has taken actions like in the past, that they are ambitious in addressing environmental and sustainability issues, that the municipality is experiencing consistent commercial and residential development, again, category 1 only. The municipality's demonstrated capabilities for responsible participation and implementation, their experience with grant programs. We're also looking if the municipality meets the interim definition for a disadvantaged community. There is a link within the RFP that'll allow you to go to a NYSERDA webpage and you can put in your municipality. This is a scoring evaluation criteria. It is not a requirement of the program, but additional evaluation points will be given to disadvantaged communities. The municipality's plan to deploy the program funds, and finally that the letters of support and the support that stakeholders are already committing to participating in the program. So I know that we're going to do questions at the end, but again, proposals are due on April 21st, 2022 by 3 p.m. Again, NYSERDA really is looking for municipalities who are willing to share information with NYSERDA through this process, so we can understand what other municipalities are going to face and develop tools to help in the process. So if, I'll take questions at the end, but any questions, you can always give me a call or send an email to that email address. And again, my apologies for the boy and the dog in the background, but it happens.
No need to apologize, Liz. We totally understand and love children. As someone said, I think in the chat, this is why we're doing this, right?
That's right. That's right.
Sure.
For all the future generations.
Liz, I'm really just honored that you shared that information. I think this is a big deal, and the fact it's a really big deal. And I know that everyone that's on here, it looks like there's 115, probably 100 of folks are folks that are working on the ground in the municipality, trying to think through these questions already, and that's why they're on this call. So this is I feel like we've really hit a nice nerve with the right target and the right people. So hopefully everyone will organize their offices to get a submission in, to respond to this RFP to the best of their ability. I'll just real quick before I introduce the next presenter. I worked on a building code enforcement project where we were looking at equity in building code enforcement throughout cities in upstate New York. And a lot of those folks hopefully are on this call as well. The questions around enforcement and how we transform our built environment are long-term conversations. And what I think NYSERDA is doing with this RFP is committing to that long-term conversation, committing to that tactical part of this. We're not discussing whether we need to do this transition. We're discussing how we're going to do this transition. And that's badass, excuse my language. So thank you so much, Liz. I so appreciate this. And I'm looking forward to one day running into you on the subway if you ever slum it down in New York.
And I should say I am in Albany.
There we go.
Everyone's sharing in it, but I do make my way down to New York City, especially Brooklyn, quite often. But I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity. We're really hoping that we get a lot of interested municipalities, and I'm hoping that the final decision as we evaluate who gets to participate this is a very hard one. So, really just thank you so much for helping me get the word out. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. And I'll say I went to Troy High, so I'm repping the Capital District too. Also, okay, so next up, we're talking about how other folks can do this and like to get yourself organized and get your offices organized to think these things through. But we're also going to bring in Luis Aguirre-Torres, who's the sustainability director for the city of Ithaca. Luis, do you know Jason Salfi, by the way? Do you know Jason? We're gonna have to circle back and talk about him. It is a connection that is relevant for your city. He is doing this. They're decarbonizing all of Ithaca's buildings by 2030. This is a big deal, and he's going to share about how they're doing it, leading by example and making it happen. Luis, are you ready?
Sure.
Great.
Well, first of all, thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
I want to just interject really quick. Sorry. Questions, please put them in the chat. We're gonna definitely capture all of those. So the more comprehensive your question, the better, and the more clear you are in your question. Make sure that goes in the chat. And now I won't interrupt you again, Luis. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what you said last time, man. Look, thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. It is a very terrifying audience, mostly because all of you know what the hell you're talking about, which is different from the speaker this time. But also, it's kind of hard to follow Elizabeth. She knows what she's talking about, really, and I appreciate that. I just learned a lot from, mostly I learned that I'm late with a number of things, such as a resolution demonstrating that we're doing this. But I want to share with you what we are doing in the city of Ithaca. I have done, a similar presentation many times, but let's use this opportunity to have the director's cut. Let's just be honest. I'm inspired by Elizabeth's child behind her. I think we need to be honest. We need to tell the truth, and we need to talk about, when it's been difficult, when it's been easy, and when we find stuff that we had no idea that was coming. So that's my intention. I have, tons of information there, but I'm gonna probably skip some of the slides. So I'm gonna start sharing now. Okay. Can you give me just thumbs up that you are seeing this? Okay, cool. So anyway, you saw this. This is me. It all happened in 2019 when the city of Ithaca decided to, go for the Ithaca Green New Deal. The intention was to commit to full decarbonization by 2030, and doing that at the same time that we were addressing economic inequality, racial injustice, and we all sang Kumbaya, held hands, and it was all awesome. But the reality is that none of that was true because we have no idea how to get there. And it's the same problem that we have every single time. We environmentalists, a lot of the time, don't focus on how this needs to happen, right? I mean, we go to Paris with this huge ambition, and then we come back with a pledge and we negotiate. And at the end of the day, nothing that we promise is doable because we didn't look at, the problems that actually happen in implementation. So the same thing happened in Ithaca, to be honest. We had this idea, but none of this was really well thought out. For example, the first conversation that I had about this, and they wanted me like, oh, you need to address existing buildings and you need to go for new buildings. By the way, I joined the city of Ithaca exactly today, 1 year ago. So it's my anniversary. But when I joined, they told me like, dude, here is the resolution. You need to make this possible. And I was like, yeah, sure. So after a few beers, I went back to the mayor and I told him like, dude, this is gonna cost about $2 billion. And he was like, like, what do you really mean? I was like, $2 billion, like I'm about the same amount this city spends in beer every year. That's what we actually have to invest in the Ithaca Green New Deal to make it possible. So then we started talking about reality, and then it was very difficult. So the first thing we did was like, okay, you wanted to reduce emissions, that's cool. We need to reduce energy intensity, and we need to make sure that the carbon in every unit of energy has to be lower than what it is. So that was like, okay, let's do that. Then the issue was, okay, what does that mean in terms of implementation? Because they were like, if we don't have the money, can we actually do, something else? We've been working, and they told me, we've been working for the past 3 years on an energy code supplement, which is going to tackle new constructions, major renovations, additions. So we could probably, what if we were just to do that? So we did the numbers, and this visualization is obviously an oversimplification, but if we were to tackle that, even though in the justification for the energy code supplement, and I mentioned that I was going to say the truth, we say that this will reduce 40% of the emissions. That's not true. We could barely reduce 25% of the emissions if we were to tackle existing buildings, considering the pipeline that the city had for 2030. So, we could tackle some of these, but, already, in terms of investment in new buildings, in compliance with the energy code supplement, we were talking about investing, hundreds of millions of dollars. But then, we could actually tackle existing buildings. We could go for existing buildings. We need about, like probably $600 million to to make that happen. And there is no point in doing that if we're just doing existing buildings. We also need to look at, how we can make transportation more efficient. And in existing buildings, we need to look at, are we going to do space heating, water heating, cooktops? Are we going to do clothes dryers? Are we going to take advantage of the economic benefits of co-deploying solar and energy storage? All of these questions started coming up. And then the city council wanted, okay, but what if we were to do all of that? And we wanted to get to 75% emissions reduction by 2030. Then I was like, well, then you need to look at, your garbage trucks. You need to start talking about electrifying refuse trucks, transit authority. We need to look at how we're going to modify the electrical infrastructure, because, at this point, I don't know if the city is going to be able to hang in there, because they wanted to do everything. So at the end of the day, the Ithaca Green New Deal that is based on a resolution to fully decarbonize the entire economy for the city by 2030, it's going to cost just under $2 billion. And we need to do so many things that is the stuff of nightmares. It's the kind of thing that geeks like me dream of. I wanted this to be my job one day. I don't know why, but it's true. I wanted this to be my job. I wanted to be in the middle of the worst conundrum that I could find myself in, as long as at the end of it, I could see something, So, there are many ways of doing this, and we have so many programs that are running in parallel. Some of them are more interesting than others, but some of them are foundational, because you can do this. You can electrify buildings. You can do whatever the hell you want. But if you don't have the concept of climate justice very well defined, if you haven't identified what a climate justice community is for your community, not for the state of New York, not for the federal government, where race apparently is not an issue, you actually need to look at what affects your community. Because when we talk about climate justice, when we talk about electrifying buildings, when we talk about compensating for historical inequities, we are really talking about those that for their specific socioeconomic status, or because of some peculiarity, when combined with climate change, that could become a threat multiplier, and that could actually have a disproportionate effect on them. So when we are talking about this, climate justice is just not as easy as just a definition. There's so much that comes into play, and that is the one topic that I'm very passionate about, but I'm not going to go in there because it's a rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, we need to look at, how we engage the community, how we develop the workforce, so we can actually get to electrify everything. Specifically for green building policy, we started with the Energy Code supplement that, we published in June, we passed in June 2021. Like, I'm going to say this out loud, but, it's a friendly thing before New York City. And then what we did in November was to pass a resolution to electrify every single existing building in the city. So in June, we decided by 2026, no new building, no major renovation, no addition is going to have natural gas. That is banned in the city of Ithaca from 2026. But also, we're going to start electrifying and retrofitting every single building in the city. That's when we added numbers. It was like, shit, man, this is going to be like $400 million just for this little piece of policy. But here's the thing. The approach that we're following in the city of Ithaca is slightly different, because when I came on board, I started looking at this and I figured like, okay, if we look at climate change as a whole, everything that we're doing is a gigantic risk mitigation strategy that we're implementing to avoid extinction. So we look at this as a fractal. So this is all about risk mitigation. So it's all about, market risk mitigation. So we eventually landed on, this is a market failure. So we need to treat it as a market failure. And what you do then is first deploy economic incentives, followed by institutional commitment, followed by regulatory instruments. That is the reason why we have a resolution committing to electrify and retrofit every single building in the city, followed by a benchmark law that is coming out in a couple of months, which will be followed by our building performance standard. We are part of the White House Coalition for Building Performance. We are looking into the different policy tools, the different mechanisms that we have available, so we can actually make this happen. And it's going to be complicated. We know that, but we're going for it. So in terms of the Energy Code supplement, I was asked to talk about this a little bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what we did with the new Energy Code in June last year was, we wanted to reduce emissions by 40% compared to the state code. Obviously, we were asking, all new constructions and major renovations to comply with New York state codes. The intention of this was to have, to be more stringent in 2023, 2026, but starting 2026 is when we are actually banning fossil fuels in new constructions. the applicability, as I mentioned, is new constructions, major renovations, but also additions for single family and duplex when it's greater than 500 square feet, or for buildings when it's more than 1,000 square feet. We have two ways of doing this. We have the prescriptive pad, we have the easy pad, and we have the whole building pad. You know, the easy pad is a point system. I need to say that I came in late to this process. So before I continue, I must say that, you know, a ton of the work, 99% of the work fell on a guy called, his name is Nick Goldsmith. He is the guy who actually put this together. He is a wonderful person and very thoughtful. He put this together. I do disagree with him in a couple of things, but honestly, very likely he's right and I'm wrong. But the reality is that, you know, achieving minimum 6 points to comply with the easy pad in our energy code opened the door. We didn't know this, but now we are seeing the results. It opens the door for people to figure out ways of doing this in a way that is not necessarily the intent of the energy code. But, you know, we intend to also figure that out and compensate, you know, with future amendments. The whole building part really, you know, it's about, you know, complying with other type certifications. The easy path compliance, as I mentioned before, you know, we assign points based on what measures they're taking. And obviously the intention is to, you know, to push for heat pumps and for particularly space heating on the residential side, and on the commercial side, we want them to focus on hot water heating using heat pumps. Renewable energy, I honestly believe that you know, we could have done a better job with the renewable energy part, but you know, this was the first effort that the city put together in order to make it happen. In terms of whole building compliance, you know, as I mentioned, it is compliance with third-party green building standards, and that was the plan. But you know, when you look at the whole thing, it's like, okay, this is a first attempt at banning fossil fuels starting 2026 in anything that is new. Then tackling existing buildings, yeah, I think New York City got it right. You know, you need a benchmark law, even though our typology and building stock is so different that we're having trouble really adjusting. You know, a benchmark law that actually allows us to really identify, you know, where the limits and the caps should be. But we're playing with that, and we're getting tons of help from New York City right now. And the building performance standard, I think we are on our way to finding something that we can actually implement. And the objective is, and here's the thing, we believe that in the implementation of the electrification and energy efficiency retrofit program, we are going to be able to bring at least, you know, a third of the population of the city in a reasonable amount of time. That is in the next 3 to 5 years. And if we're able to do that, then with the new policy tools, you know, become available. For example, you can start legislating against those that are disproportionately harming others by still, you know, generating emissions from energy use inside buildings. And then, you know, it opens the door for different ways of legislating this without necessarily telling people you cannot have natural gas and then, you know, expecting a lawsuit back, as, you know, we're getting already. So I'm going to stop here. There is, you know, a ton of stuff that I had after this. Oh, well, I just want to mention this. So what we did in November was to ratify the results of an RFP that was to, like, you know, anybody who wants to help us out, you know, figuring out how to address existing buildings. And that was, you know, we were looking for a financial solution, a technology solution, and climate justice solution. Anybody who can figure out how to do all these things together, you know, is welcome to play with the city. And we found a consortium of about 12 different companies that is led by Block Power. And they are the guys that are famous because also they do a ton of marketing. But, you know, we have a large number of organizations. And since November, we have added a total of, right now, it's 57 different organizations that are involved in making this happen. It is a nightmare. It is so complicated, but thankfully there are so many people in the city of Ithaca, like some of them on this call today, that have tons of experience, you know, running HeatSmart or having done this in different places. So we're getting a lot of help, but, you know, we're just at the beginning. And I am hopeful that we're gonna, you know, get it done, but God, this is fun. Anyway, I'm going to stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, Luis. That was great. And it is a very daunting but exciting challenge that you're embarking on there, and that we're all trying to do as quickly as possible. So next up, Jen Metzger, who is a dear friend, and we're fortunate enough to have her as the Senior Policy Advisor for New Yorkers for Clean Power. Jen was also a state senator until pretty recently, so will not be weighing in on any of our legislative priorities, but is going to tell you about the important recommendations that we all need to support and push for in the Climate Action Council scoping plan hearings that are kicking off next week. So Jen, thanks for all your great work on this. Can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Betta. And I want to thank Liz and Luis for those great presentations. I am a huge believer in the power of local governments to really lead on climate. And this opportunity from NYSERDA is incredibly exciting. I hope a lot of local governments, jump on this. I'm going to shift our focus to the state level and talk about the incredibly important moment we're in right now to set the course for meeting New York's ambitious emissions reductions and equity goals in its climate law. The State Climate Action Council has released the draft scoping plan for public comment. It covers all emission sources in New York, including some very significant recommendations on the subject of today's teach-in, New York's buildings. We don't have any time to lose. I'm sure you all saw the truly alarming news this past week about unprecedented heat waves in the poles and at the Earth's poles. If we do not take steps to steeply cut greenhouse gas emissions in the coming decades, global mean temperatures are predicted to rise to a level that greatly increases harm to the planet and to us. So that's a downer, I know, but on the positive side, meeting New York's climate goals will have enormous benefits for New York's economy, our health, our quality of life, in addition to the climate benefits. So I am going to share my screen because I've got some slides to share. Okay, that's when we adopted, when we passed the CLCPA. It was a very, very exciting day at the State Senate. Okay, so what is the draft scoping plan? It's, in short, the action plan to reach the goals of the climate law. And these include reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, just a few years away, below 1990 levels, and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. We're also to generate 70% of our electricity from renewable resources by 2030 and achieve carbon-free, fossil fuel-free electricity system by 2040. And really importantly, we have to make sure that we are achieving a just and equitable transition. The law requires that we dedicate 35% of the benefits of clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities, with the goal of 40%, which is really what it should be minimally. So why is the scoping plan important? Well, it's going to shape state legislation, regulation, and the decision-making of every state agency and department in the coming years. So it is super important. The plan was developed by a 22-member Climate Action Council established under the climate law. It includes all of the heads of the relevant state departments and agencies, as well as 10 appointed members that include a mix of environmental and climate justice advocates, industry representatives, and scientists. Its work was informed by the recommendations of 7 advisory panels with expertise in the different areas. Recommendations on buildings were based on the work of the Energy Efficiency and Housing Panel. Both the Climate Justice Working Group and the Just Transition Working Group, which were both also created under the climate law, provided input as well. So this pie chart is from the scoping plan and is based on the most up-to-date greenhouse gas emissions inventory for New York. And as you can see, buildings are responsible for the largest share of emissions, with transportation a close second. Combustion of fossil fuels in buildings for heat and hot water account for most of the building emissions. So eliminating these emissions are really going to require truly transformative changes, as Louise alluded to. The analysis that was undertaken for the scoping plan estimates that New York has to electrify 1 to 2 million homes with energy efficient heat pumps by 2030 to stay on track with its climate goals. And by 2050, most of New York's 600 million plus buildings will need to be all electric and powered by a clean renewable grid. Now, this is going to take a bit of effort, and there are certainly challenges. New York's building stock is very old. Most of our buildings were built before there were any energy codes, and they're inefficient. And many have lots of other problems like mold that need to be fixed before doing things like tightening the building envelope. And there's also a major affordability challenge. Nearly half of New Yorkers are low and moderate income and are going to need assistance to make building improvements. NYSERDA has estimated that at least $1 billion a year will be needed to assist these households. But there are challenges, but there are also, as I said earlier, enormous benefits to improving our buildings. Getting off fossil fuels is going to greatly improve air quality, and that's going to result in huge improvements to public health and huge public health savings. It's also, the buildings is the biggest job creator. Creating energy efficient all electric buildings is estimated to create about 140,000 jobs by 2030, which is huge. And that's, again, if we're staying on track to meet our climate goals. And many of the equipment changes that will be made between now and 2050 would be made anyway at the end of their useful life. So it is about making the right choices. And this slide just shows the health benefits and savings from energy improvements to low-income homes alone, which is estimated to be on the order of $9 billion. So for the remaining time, I just want to briefly touch on some of the significant scoping plan recommendations, which we urge you to show support for in public comments. One set of recommendations focuses on building codes and standards, including passing the advanced building codes and appliance standards legislation. I know I'm not supposed to talk about legislation, but this is scoping plan recommendations, although this bill is actually included in the governor's budget proposal. And the other one that I left off the slide, but want to mention, and Luis talked about the importance of it, is benchmarking, a requirement to ensure that there's benchmarking of buildings. We need to know what's going on in buildings, to measure our progress and put the right policies in place. Another key recommendation, the plan calls for new buildings to be fossil fuel free beginning in 2024. So this would cover most residential buildings by 2024, and then would be extended to new construction of all buildings by 2027. This is, technically feasible, it's cost effective, and new construction is really the low hanging fruit. For existing buildings, the scoping plan recommends that by 2030, zero emission standards be in place for end of useful life replacement of fossil fuel heating and hot water equipment. And then in 2035, those standards would be extended to large multifamily and commercial properties. Also by 2035, zero emission standards would be in place, again, for end of useful life of equipment, for appliances like dryers and stoves. So just to be clear, what this means is that, you're not going to have to replace a working system. It means that when, your boiler goes, for instance, and needs to be replaced, you would change over at that point to another system, technically, or likely a heat pump system. So, as we transition to electric technologies, we have to be transitioning off of utility gas, which is what most New Yorkers currently use. I think about 19% still use home heating oil, and I think the number of wood may be around 10%. Somebody may be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a complex undertaking, switching over from the utility gas system. It has to be carefully coordinated and can't increase the burden on ratepayers, especially on low and moderate income households. The scoping plan recommends that a couple of things happen ASAP. Critically, the law that governs utility gas and electric service has to be made consistent with the Climate Act, getting rid of utilities' obligation to serve gas, that's in the law, and supporting the transition to an equitable energy efficient electrification. NYSERDA and the utilities also have to immediately stop promoting gas and ramp up marketing and incentives for heat pumps. And finally, and importantly, the planning has to be done to transition to clean heating and cooling systems in a way that maintains affordable, safe, and reliable utility service. Recently introduced bill, the Gas Transition and Affordability Act, would provide a comprehensive approach and should be included in the scoping plan. So it's also important to express support for the scoping plan's focus on efficient electrification to eliminate emissions and steer clear of false solutions being promoted by the fossil fuel industry for buildings like RNG and hydrogen. And finally, and critically, the scoping plan must include a firm commitment to the $1 billion that's been estimated that's needed annually to support disadvantaged communities, LMI households, in transitioning to efficient electrified homes. And the state must also get to work like now, basically, in identifying workforce development needs and developing plans to scale up the workforce, because otherwise we won't have the trained workforce we need to do all the work involved in decarbonizing our buildings. And this is a really important issue. So we strongly encourage you to weigh into this process during the public comment period. It runs through June 10th. You can submit written comments and also attend a public hearing near you. I'm going to put a link, or maybe Betta can put a link in the chat that we have to a guide to help with comments on the building section specifically of the plan. This is the public's one choice to weigh in on a plan that will have a big impact on how and whether we meet our state's climate goals. So super important. Thanks so much. And we'll now, I think, shift over to the Q&A portion of the teach-in.
Thanks so much, Jen. That was fantastic, very thorough. Thanks to all our speakers. And I see we only have 10 minutes until time, our allotted time is over, but Liz did agree to stay a few minutes over to answer questions about the RFP. So thank you so much, Liz. It's incredibly generous of you. We will also be sending a recording of this with everyone's slides and the document Jen mentioned that will help people if you want some of those, recommendations distilled for your comments, if you choose to participate in a hearing, which we hope you will, and also submit written comments. So before we move on to questions, because we do, have a little bit of time for some of your great questions, I also just want to mention very briefly, and I'll put a link in the chat, that, as many of the recommendations that are included in the scoping plan that we want to advocate for also have parallels in the legislative process and the budget that is being finalized in the next week. And so there's a big push right now to let our governor and legislature know that these very important key policy changes will enable us to decarbonize buildings, ranging from changing our public service law to make that in alignment with CLCPA, to having more ambitious energy efficiency and appliance standards and better building codes, and also beginning to phase out fossil fuels in new construction beginning in 2024. So please consider signing this letter. I put a link in the chat to a website that has a little take action that will send a letter automatically to the governor and to the legislature supporting those, so that we can have a truly just, equitable and timely transition off gas and fossil fuels in the building sector. Without further ado, yes, Ibrahim, want to kick it off with some questions that people have in the chat?
Yeah, two of the ones that seem to be most sort of like basic. The one that says that the program applied to small municipalities, 8 to 10,000 population, as well as larger communities. That's one. And I just want to add to that one the question around how many of the awards will be given out. Liz, if you could just to kick off those two kind of sort of basic questions.
Or there's no population minimum or maximum. All municipalities across the state are eligible to apply. There is 2.6 million set aside for the program, 2 million for the $500,000 award. So we're looking at about 4 municipalities. And then we have 600,000 set aside for those municipalities that have already, as I've said, taken steps to or already adopted a more advanced code. So that we're looking at about 3 awards.
Okay, so everybody better get their right away. Not that everybody shouldn't go for this, whether you get the money or not, but money helps, and that will enable many municipalities to do more good work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Ibrahim, did you?
I just wanted to add to that. I don't want any smaller municipality to be discouraged on this. We really are looking at municipalities that have the experience, have taken these actions in the past, have development going on. So it's the size of the municipality is not a scoring criteria.
Okay, is NYSEG a participating utility?
I have to double check on that.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of good questions. Let's see. One from Bet Abroad. No, not me. I accidentally shared my invite with many other people, so I'm not sure who that is, but we have a question related to refrigerants, which of course are a very serious greenhouse gas emission. And as we electrify, how do we address that? I don't know which speaker would like to take that on. Jen, did you want to speak to the refrigerant issue? Oh, you're muted.
I always do that. Sorry about that. It's a huge issue. And I wrote my dissertation on on the refrigerants and the phase out of chlorofluorocarbons, and now it's now it's a huge climate issue too. But it's we have to shift to refrigerants with a low global warming or low or no global warming potential. The refrigerants that are currently used are super high, have a super high global warming potential. It's a closed system, but leaks happen. And that's just they have to be replaced. So that there are actually recommendations in the scoping plan. They're of a general nature, I would say, but they point to the need of this being a real priority to make that switch. And of course, there's now a federal commitment to reducing HFCs, eliminating AHCs, right, under the climate, international climate agreement. So, but yeah, you raise an important issue, and that's something that's going to have to be dealt with. There's no question.
Can I, it seems like we have a question.
Ibrahim, also, Luis is gonna have to go in a minute.
Oh,
so I just
great,
wanted to
okay.
make sure, sorry, he messaged me privately. So just wanted to see, Luis, if you had anything, in particular you wanted to address. There were a lot of questions, great questions, including some about affordability and how to make people do this who like A, can't afford to, and B, don't want to, which I don't know if you'll be able to answer in 2 minutes, but I'll let you take a crack at it.
I can try. I'm going to start with the refrigerants. We are very conscious of that. We're starting with air source heat pumps right now, and we are talking about conventional refrigerants, but we are very actively engaging Mitsubishi and other manufacturers because we want to start testing out CO2 heat pumps. The good news is that the program is ramping up. We are still fixing a number of issues. So we don't envision doing a ton of deployments before we figure this out. So the intention is to address that because exactly the global warming potential that these refrigerants have is huge. In terms of affordability, we are I think a lot of what we're doing is not so much about what needs to be done, but how we can pay for it. It's all about financial innovation. That was the entire focus of the program that we're developing in Ithaca, and the idea behind it is to make it not only affordable, to come up with a way of subsidizing low-income housing to make sure that they can participate, benefit from better comfort and quality and in general better living by participating in this program. But this requires programmatic thinking from an investor's point of view and certain creativity in the way we reuse some of the money. For example, we went back to NYSERDA, to the Department of Energy, to the EPA, and we communicated that the fragmented model of incentive distribution may not be ideal for what we want to do. So we're in the process of developing some sort of pilot program to see if by consolidating some of these incentives, we reduce the cost of capital and therefore make it affordable. And then finally, about the question about the utility company, we are working with them. We did an analysis. We expect to triple the summer load during winter once we have 70% electrification. And that is obviously alarming because right now our substations are already winter peaking, which means that if we don't have at least $40 million investment in the distribution grid in the city, we're never going to be able to electrify. And that goes for the entire state of New York. But we actively engage the utility company, the Public Service Commission, the Office of the Governor, and the Department of Energy to accelerate the improvements on the distribution grid. There are so many components. Then there's workforce development and a number of other things, and it gets more and more complicated. But it's it all needs to happen, and we're hopeful that we're going to uncover more things in advance, so everybody can benefit from this experiment. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Luis. That was fantastic. Truly inspired by everything you're doing, and really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And keep up the hard work. Real quick, I just want to say thank you, Luis. Also, I just want Liz, if you could just really quick, is there for some of the municipalities that have shared services, is that a consideration with the submission? Because I know some share building code support, and some of the smaller municipalities do that. Is that does that considered as part of the grant process?
The ultimate applicant has to have to be the authority having jurisdiction for enforcement of the energy code. So sharing of staff, unless there is a joint energy code, I guess is not eligible. We did have a question recently, if a village within a town wanted to apply, would that be considered 1 or 2 applications? And those would be considered 2 separate applications.
Got it. Great.
So I don't know if that answers the question. I apologize.
No, that helps me a lot, because I know some municipalities are very nimble about how they manage some of their building code functions. And so that I think that will help clarify for some folks. Sorry, but I just wanted to get that one in there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I will say that we'll do our best to follow up with people in another email for any questions that we don't get to. And I know we were going to be wrapping up at 2, so maybe we'll just stay on for a couple more minutes if our speakers are able to. One of the questions I see in the chat is about for people who don't get in on this first round, what steps are recommended to get us on the right path? How can we keep encouraging municipalities to take these actions? Do you think that there'll be any additional incentives after this initial RFP, Liz?
I can't say for certain if there'll be additional funding rounds. What I can say is the work of the technical support contractor basically includes them coming up with 2 volumes or 2 chapters of documents that can be shared across the state. So at the end of the first year, the technical support contractor will be gathering information from that adoption process, from the outreach process, and putting that into chapter 1 of adoption, engagement, and those lessons learned and those best practices can then be distributed across the state for others who want to start taking these steps. At the end of year 2, you're going to have your implementation, your training, your education. And so the technical contractor, while going through and gathering the information, will create, chapter 2. And so we'll have one full comprehensive document at the end of the 2 years, but it will allow for others to start taking the action and learning from the work that these municipalities are doing.
Great, thank you.
But if I could also just add that communities can also pass the stretch code right now. And that's not, stretching to 0, but it does result in almost like a 20% energy savings for homes. And that's a big deal for your community. So encourage communities to look into passing that. And that's a model energy supplemental code that's on NYSERDA's website. You don't get 500 million or $500,000. What is it? What's the total?
$500,000.
$500,000. I think this one of it
500 million. Promising a lot there.
So it's a little less, but you do get a lot of points, clean energy toward bigger grants, and it's worth doing for its own sake.
I saw Juan Pablo's hand up before. So I can, unmute you, Juan Pablo, if you would like to ask your question.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for the awesome event. I've been curious about how Ithaca is making it work, and that was very illuminating. And it's also very exciting to hear about this building code initiative. So this is a question for Jen. I think the scoping plan says we need to electrify 1 to 2 million homes by 2030. So the question is, how many of them do we expect to install heat pumps anyway without any additional policy? And how do we close the gap, given that the requirement to change out your boiler for a heat pump only kicks in after 2030? And given that I just installed heat pumps and it was very expensive. And so how do we make it so much cheaper that actually, let me not even prescribe it. What's the gap and how do we close it?
Right. So you point out an important point, which is the scoping plan recommendation. There's this gap, right? We have to, and that's all new construction. I mean, hopefully that will be put in place and that will be addressed. And it's really cost effective to make to go all electric in new construction, and the savings are huge. Operational savings are huge. But for existing homes, yeah, there's the upfront cost of the system, and the payback varies greatly depending on what you're using right now. I mean, for like number 2, heating oil and propane, it is like you'll save lots of money by switching over to heat pumps. Now, if you're like connected to the gas system, well, right now the gas system, gas is everything's expensive right now, electricity and heating by gas. Difference is going to have to be somehow made up to people have to be incentivized to do it by 2030. And it's not just a question of incentives, though that's really important. It's also educating and informing people about this technology, about the health benefits and all of the other benefits of switching off of combusting fossil fuels in your home. So there's a lot of work that has to be done on both fronts. It has to be made more cost effective to do that. There has to be, I think, much easier ways to finance it over time, and finance those changes, through those improvements to your home. It should be coupled with efficiency improvements, but also that education piece is huge. And we're really encouraging that in our recommendations to launch a sustained and major statewide public education and awareness raising campaign on this front.
Has there been any analysis of, like, depending on how much you subsidize the heat pumps? I know there's already a subsidy, but like as you increase the subsidy, how much, what we expect the adoption uptake to be?
I don't have the answer to that question. I don't. I can say one thing, in my service territory, Central Hudson service territory, there were great heat pump incentives, and the companies that installed them locally couldn't keep up with there's so much, there was such a high level going on, but now those incentives have dropped at a time when they should be increasing. So, that's gotta be addressed. But I don't have that specific data, Juan, that you're asking for.
Let's see. I think there's one other question for Liz, and then we should probably close out so we're not being a hog with your time. At what stage does the consultant contractor come in? Who can help with preparing the RFP?
We are under contract with our technical support contractor. We went through a competitive selection process at NYSERDA. So when the municipalities are selected and enter into contract with NYSERDA, that technical support provider is going to be with you right away. As far as responding to the RFP, that's up to the municipality. I have gotten questions on this before. Does it have to be done, by the building department? Does it have to be done by the planning staff? Our answer is, we don't care who writes it, as long as there is that resolution that comes from your local legislative body saying that we know what we're committing to by applying to this program. So, if you have an outside contractor who writes the application, or, members of a volunteer sustainability board, it's fine, as long as there's that resolution saying that the local legislative body understands what's going on.
Which I'll just throw in there that it basically says, this is almost like a power building collaborative process that you're kind of encouraging people to engage in, so they're not, because a lot of times smaller municipalities act within silos, but you're saying, don't come to this in silos, come to this as a unified front that's ready to make something happen. Is that accurate, Liz?
Yes, that's why we're looking for the letters of support, an understanding from the community of what this means. We want to ensure that, we understand that there's going to be obstacles along the way. That's the whole point of going through this. So, we learn from it, but, we want the municipality to understand there's going to be obstacles along the way as well. And we want to, hopefully have 4 successful adoption and implementation processes at the end of this.
And can I just make really quick better? That gives the opportunity for the activists that are on this call, that are really connected to the leadership in their municipality, to guide and push the leaders of their community to be the web and be the connective tissue. So if they take you seriously, this is a great opportunity to bring something to the table that you can help unify and bring folks together. And then also when it comes to the CLPCA and the execution of that, this is an opportunity for smaller municipalities to lead by example and to show how they can, demonstrating what smaller places can do and how other places can follow them.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Leading by example as we scale up building decarbonization and electrification across the state. So really appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you so much, Liz and Jen and Ibrahim and everyone for participating, for your great questions. If you still have questions that didn't get answered, I apologize. Please reach out to us. We'll send an email to everybody with the slides and the recording and a way to participate in the Climate Action Council hearings that are coming up, and a link to the RFP that Liz presented on. And feel free to respond to that email with any other questions that you might have. We're going to be doing another one of these on April 12th, which is a Tuesday at 12 o'clock, focused on waste, which is another important sector to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and achieve the CLCPA climate mandate. So hope to see people on that, and be in touch in the meantime. Also, if you'd like to get more involved in any of the big legislative budget push that we're doing right now on building decarbonization, it would be great to hear from you, and look forward to continuing to build the movement for an equitable, clean energy economy. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care and be well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Beautiful
very
day,
much.
everybody.